Well, good morning, everyone, once again. Hope everyone is enjoying the presentations today. My name is Presley Gillespie. I'm the president of Neighborhood Allies, which is a citywide community development organization that has recently actually been relaunched to really focus on improving the physical, social, and economic conditions of our neighborhoods. I think it's really appropriate that I was invited to serve on this panel as the moderator of the People Panel, and I'm delighted and really honored to be amongst the presence of some of the most esteemed experts really all over the world. I am a newcomer myself to Pittsburgh. I arrived here about a little over 10 months ago, very excited. But upon arrival, I immediately noticed that Pittsburgh was on a lot of lists, a lot of great lists. The most livable city, the most resilient city, a city with one of the greatest views as we can see as we look outside the window, a city filled with generosity. When we look at the philanthropic leadership and the philanthropic generosity in Pittsburgh, it's literally unparalleled. We're also known as the city of recreation, the most bikeable city, the most affordable city. And we're also known as the comeback city. Pittsburgh, as we already know, was a mill town. The mills closed and we all suffered. But we bounced back with a stronghold on tech, with a stronghold on education, with a stronghold on healthcare. This city is poised for explosive growth with our new leadership, the mayor's administration, the county executive, the nonprofit organizations. This city is really an exciting place to be in 2015, but we're also at a very pivotal point in our city's trajectory. Again, our panel is really going to focus on the people. As our city continues to come back and indeed once again thrive, one of the most important things is that we ensure that not only do we not leave people behind, but that we recognize that people are our greatest asset. Indeed, it is the people of Pittsburgh that's going to propel us into the future. So I'm really delighted to talk about and bring on the stage several experts, again, across the United States and across the globe, that spends every waking moment figuring out how to connect underserved populations in our communities to the city and to the region. We're all focused on building ladders of opportunities in neighborhoods left behind. We're focused on how do we begin to invest in neighborhood innovation, neighborhood leadership, and neighborhood talent. How do we partner for more impact and build cross-sector collaborations to grow jobs, mobilize capital, revitalize neighborhoods, and improve the lives of the people in them, both socially and economically. We're in the midst of accelerating change, and we have become adaptive to that change. It's a very exciting time to be here as we really this is about looking forward to the future, and the future is very bright. So with that, I'm going to bring up really someone I've admired for many years, my heroine, a national expert on inclusion, equality, social equity, and as someone that's going to present a really dazzling presentation to us on how we continue to make sure that we are a city for all people and that all people can thrive and prosper in the great city of Pittsburgh. So without further ado, I want to bring up Angela Glover Blackwell, the CEO and founder of PolicyLink.
Thank you. Well, hello. It's a real pleasure to be here, and it's always so exciting to be around people who are excited about their future, because it really is all about the future. I am so thrilled to be on the panel talking about people, because that's what I think about all the time. And I so enjoyed listening to the panel talking about the planet, because in some ways we're in a flipped situation. That we actually, those who accept that we were in trouble regarding our environment and the planet, we know why we needed to act regarding the planet, but we weren't sure what to do. And we're learning what to do, and we're learning it rapidly. When it comes to people, the notion of all people being able to participate, prosper, thrive, reach their full potential, all people, we know what to do, but we don't seem to know why to do it. Let me tell you what I mean. We actually know how to make sure that all can participate and reach their full potential. If I describe to you a place where a huge population of a state, only 50% of the people had a high school diploma, infant mortality is very high, other health issues quite prevalent, job skills at a very low level, you would think, it's going to be tough to do anything about that place. But you know, that place was California in the 1940s, 1950s, just coming off of World War II. And that population was overwhelmingly white. What California did is it rolled up its sleeves and it created the best education system, the best health system, the most productive population that the country had ever seen. And by 1962, the Newsweek headline was "Booming California, the country's #1 state," because they really did equity. They made sure that those who needed an investment got the investment that they needed. We know how to make sure that people can participate. We've done it over the years. We've done it mostly from a moral place, that we realized that black people were starting with a disadvantage, that many people who are Latino are coming into the same communities that had not served black populations well and had a disadvantage. And out of the goodness of people's hearts, from a moral place, from a conviction that it is not right to leave people behind, we've learned how to educate people. We've learned how to make sure that people can get in the workforce. We've learned how to deal with infant mortality and obesity and all of those issues, but we've learned it in increments. What we see are little islands of excellence here and there, a place where a neighborhood got it right, a community that can say 25% of the population that was not doing well is now improving. We know what to do. We haven't done it at scale, and it's because we haven't really understood why we need to do it at scale, why we need to do it beyond the moral imperative. We are rapidly becoming a nation in which the majority will be people of color very soon. You know the date, 2043. The majority of people in this country will be Latino, Asian, Native American, African American, mixed. What you may not know is since 2012, the majority of all babies born in this country have been of color. That by the end of this decade, by the end of 2019, the majority of all children 18 and under will be of color. In California, 73% now of all children 18 and under are of color. What you may not know is that by 2030, the majority of the young workforce will be of color. When you think about all of the challenges that you are facing here and determined to fix, when you think about becoming a model for the nation, when you think perhaps that you could be a model for the world, I would suggest that if you don't get the inclusion agenda right, you don't have the right to stand as a model, and no one will look to you as a model because you will not be a model. Getting the inclusion agenda right has become a national and an economic imperative. It will always be a moral imperative, but it has become a national and an economic imperative. We're not going to solve the problems that we've talked about in terms of the planet if we don't get comfortable living next door to the other. We're not going to get out of our cars and use public transit in the ways that we need to if we're not comfortable sitting next to the other. We are not going to be able to stop being a throwaway nation if we don't understand that our future requires that we live together, that we live in dense communities, and we have a lot to overcome before we get there. What we've seen happen is that as communities have discovered new urbanism and they understand how wonderful it is to be older, to live in a community, to age in place, as young people are returning to cities and really seeing the vibrancy there and understanding how enriching it is to live around rich culture, inevitably, as those places become hot, the people of color get pushed out. The people who were there during the hard times don't get to stay and enjoy the good times. We can't keep doing that. We've got to overcome all of these notions about who gets to live where, under what circumstances, if we're going to live in the ways that we were just talking about earlier. If we're going to be competitive in a global economy, we have to be able to tap the human capital that exists in our communities. We have to tap all of it, not just some of it. If we are going to have a democracy that we can be proud of on the world stage, it has to be one in which all can participate. These notions of equity, and when I use that term, I mean just and fair inclusion into a society in which all can participate, prosper, and reach their full potential. That's all I mean. This equity agenda has become the thing that we have to bake in. We can't do it as an afterthought. We can't do it on the side. We can't do it when we get everything else in place. We have to lead with it. And leading with it will help us. It won't slow us down. When you think about this notion of who do you have in mind when you're solving a problem, it really is important to think about those who are most vulnerable right from the beginning. The example I like to use to make that point is those cutouts in the sidewalk. Those cutouts in the sidewalk, those curb cuts, they're there because of the advocacy of people with disabilities. Those curb cuts are there so that people with disabilities could fully realize the rights that they had fought for and won in terms of being able to have access to jobs and public accommodations and all of the things that people should have access to. But just to have a right and not to be able to do it if you were in a wheelchair was a hollow right. Through further advocacy of people with disabilities, particularly people in wheelchairs, we got those cutouts on the curb. But how many times have you been pushing a baby carriage and been so happy you didn't have to pick that contraption up to go from one corner to the other? How many times have you seen workers pulling wagons and pushing carts and had their work made easier because of those curb cutouts? How many times have you been pulling a suitcase across town like me trying to catch a train and you made it? Or had your mind at ease because your new bike rider was traversing the city, sidewalk to sidewalk, not riding in the streets? When we solve problems for those who are most vulnerable, we solve them for everyone. So by saying, here is our toughest challenge, leading with it, bringing the lens of how do we make sure that this strategy, this new initiative, this innovation, this new frontier is going to benefit everybody, we've got to start by thinking about those who need it most, and we will have tremendous benefits that will flow across the board. As we think about the equity agenda and the economy, we know what to do. We know that we have to grow good jobs and we have to connect them to people who need them most. We've had a movement across the country called community benefits that has moved out of people having to picket on the outside of a new development or a new venture into planning departments, into City Hall, so that we now have people who are making the decisions on the front end, thinking about the benefits that have to flow to all. In Oakland, California, when the Oakland Army base, which had just been abandoned for 25 years, finally now is being developed into an international logistics center. A year before they broke ground, they set up a job training center to begin to train people in the poorest neighborhoods, Latinos, African Americans, Southeast Asians, to be ready for those jobs. So by the time they actually started, they had a workforce that was getting prepared. They decided that 25% of all the apprenticeship hours would go to those hardest to place: veterans, long-term unemployed, people who were formerly incarcerated. They've really carved out the entrepreneurial opportunities to make sure they're available to low-income people in the community, taking something they were going to do anyway, leading with equity, and bringing this forward in a way that connects the people who need the most to living wage jobs, to career pathways, to educational opportunities. We need to make sure that we are also building the capabilities that we're going to need for the future. 21st century jobs are going to be very demanding, and it is really too bad that so many people in this country will not be ready for those jobs if we don't step up to do something about it. By 2020, 47% of all jobs will require at least an associate's degree. Only 28% of African Americans, 28% of Latinos, and 15% of foreign-born Latinos have it. We need to take a lesson from Tennessee, where the governor there has signed a bill saying that anybody who graduates from college can have free 2 years of community college education, and anybody who finishes the community college gets to start 4-year as a junior, cutting a 4-year degree cost in half and really creating a pathway for people to get the education that we need for 21st century. We no longer can talk about K-12, we need to talk about preschool through an associate's degree at a minimum. We all need to think about ways to do that. And I'm going to be watching Tennessee very carefully, because while I think that is fabulous, we also know that if you don't target, if you don't reach out, if you don't work with the high schools, if you don't work with the elementary schools, even though community college is free, those who need it most may not get it. We've got to focus on building capabilities and making connections to 21st century work. We also have to be sure that we are reducing the housing and the transportation burden. Too many families have no ability to build wealth because they pay too much of their income for housing, they pay too much of their income for transportation. Good public transportation systems, affordable housing, those are absolutely essential for building where we need to get in the future. But we need to make sure that we don't do what we have done in the past, and that is put the affordable housing in the communities that have no opportunity. Everybody needs to live in a community of opportunity. What sense does it make to take a community with failing schools, with no grocery stores, with complete isolation, and put the affordable housing there? We need to put affordable housing where there's opportunity. And the last thing we need to do is consciously remove barriers and expand opportunity. We need to do something about these incarceration scandal in this nation. Not only is it hurting those people who have been incarcerated, many for offenses that didn't deserve it, but we've created a legacy of absence in communities, that families and children are left without the fullness that they need in order to thrive. And we need to create pathways to real opportunity. And that will happen when we realize that every community needs to be a community of opportunity, with good schools and jobs and public transit and healthy environments where you can exercise and have access to fresh fruits and vegetables and everything else that is important. Equity is no longer only a moral imperative. It has become a national and an economic imperative, and the economy that we want will be an economy that is led with equity, that is committed to being equitable, and that understands that equity is the superior growth model. Thank you.
Riveting as always.
Thank you.
Angela, you alluded to really essentially changing the status quo and doing things differently than we have in the past. Sometimes in neighborhoods, in government, or in levels of authority, there is a resistance to change. There is a resistance to, changing the status quo. It's easier to keep doing the things that you've already been doing. How do you address just changing the status quo in terms of bringing this equity model to the forefront?
The status quo is changing. The status quo is changing. Now, coming here yesterday, I ran into someone in the airport, a woman just about my age. I don't know how old she is. She probably doesn't know how old I am. But I'd say we are in about 5 years of each other. And she is a giant in the field of early childhood education. And she got in line right behind me, and I was so happy to see her. And I said, "Oh, you must be so busy because early childhood education is front and center everywhere." She said, "Yeah, people keep asking me when I'm going to retire." She said, "This is the moment I have been waiting for." And I said, "Funny, I say that to people all the time. This is the moment I have been waiting for." We are having a national conversation about race, thrust into our living rooms in the most horrible way. We all have to be sick on our stomachs by what is finally coming out for all to see that people in the black community have always known about. But we're having a national conversation about race. The data that I'm putting out about the changing demographics, I didn't discover it. I'm not the only one saying it. You probably are hearing about it every place you go. It is becoming obvious that our fates are intertwined, that we cannot go on as a nation if we don't repair the sins of the past and prepare ourselves for the productivity and the contribution of the future. The time is now. People are listening. People are wanting to talk about this who never have before. So I think timing is one thing, and it is true. We know what works. The tagline for PolicyLink is lifting up what works. We have deep knowledge about what to do. We need political commitment, we need public commitment, and we need to put our resources where they have to be, not just for those who've been left behind, but for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All I can say is let's get the work done. Let's go to work. Our next presenter, we talk a lot about socio and ecological benefits of urban agriculture, particularly in neighborhoods that have no longer have the density they once had, neighborhoods where a lot of structures have been demolished. We need to find active reuses for public land and green space. Our next presenter does that. He runs an organization that provides the benefits of social benefits of urban agriculture in ways that it can really repurpose vacant land for the future. So with that, we're going to bring out Greg Watson from Schumacher Center for a New Economy.
Thank you. It is a real pleasure and honor to be here. And I have to say, this is just a shot here. This is Ohio City. It's 5 interconnected farms right outside the city of Cleveland, Ohio, which is where I grew up, my old hometown. Had to be careful. Last night I got a chance to meet Franco Harris, and we got chatting a little bit. And when I mentioned I was from Cleveland and that I was a Cleveland Brown fan, I hesitated to talk about Jim Brown, but anyway, we'll go from there. But designing sustainable urban communities is something that's been a commitment for me for quite a while. Actually, it's gone on 40 years now. I want to talk about the Anthropocene. I don't know if that's a term that people have heard about, but it's actually a topic that's being debated among scientists today, is whether or not we've entered a new geologic epoch, a new geologic era. And the Anthropocene is actually one that says that for the first time now, humans, the impact of our activities, human activities, have global manifestations, global implications. As a matter of fact, we are shaping the very systems that maintain the conditions necessary for life, for better or for worse. And I think many of us would assume, or would come to the conclusion that unfortunately it's been for the worse. Now, we're not going to dwell on problems, I know, but I definitely need to make sure that we understand the context. And so what that does suggest, among other things, is, as this guy mentioned, we do need a different way of thinking. Now, this was in some of the preparatory materials that were sent out ahead of time, and I know it's something that P4 sort of certainly believes in, at least the organizers of P4, that we have to change our way of thinking. Now, this comes from a guy who did thought experiments and really redefine the structure of the universe. So I think we want to take him seriously when he says that we probably do need different ways of thinking about the problems that are facing us. So we can't use the same thought processes that got us into the situations that we're in. I don't know if you know how many people here know Buckminster Fuller? Oh, that's great. That's great. So, and because Bucky was the person that probably influenced me more than anyone else, and I probably wouldn't be standing on the stage and doing what I'm doing had I not encountered him when I had a personal dilemma as a freshman student at Tufts University. And because I grew up on the banks of Lake Erie and the Cuyahoga River, I became an environmentalist early in life. But I was challenged by my African-American colleagues when I arrived at Tufts, wanting to know why I was committing my time and efforts to the environmental movement, which they thought was not just, and this hurt a lot, irrelevant to the cause of the civil rights movement and all those going on, but as they said to me, maybe even counterproductive, even sinister. And I said, I don't understand. They said, well, listen to the slogans, Greg. Listen to what they're talking about. Limited growth, no growth. How do we factor into that equation? Where's there room for economic equality in a scenario that talks about limited or no growth? It sounds, they said to me, as if it's a ploy to maintain the status quo. The haves will continue to have, and the have-nots will continue to struggle. And I will say at that time, I did not have an intellectual response to that challenge, but intuitively, I felt that the twin goals of environmental equality and economic equality had to be compatible. But I didn't quite know at that time until I sort of encountered Buckminster Fuller, who talked about the concepts of synergy, doing more with less, and really comprehensive anticipatory design science. He also knew that in this, if we're going to solve our problems, and if we're going to talk about different ways of thinking about the world, cities are going to have to be a key to the way that we change, what we change our thinking about. And the question I guess we have to ask is, do we think that cities are part of the problem? Are they reactionary victims, or can we be part of the solution? Someone mentioned earlier issues of density, and we are going to have to deal with density. Unplanned density leads to chaos, as we can see here. This is Kowloon and Hong Kong. It was an actual city that was unplanned, certainly. But we have to start thinking about not only changing the way of thinking, but changing our systems, and changing the very systems that contribute to meeting the everyday needs of our lives, and that's our food, energy, and shelter. I work at a place called the Schumacher Center for New Economics. E.F. Schumacher, many years ago, wrote a book called Small is Beautiful, Economics as if People Mattered. And I think there are some folks now that aren't quite sure that our economic system really factors in people. There's a bottom line, and every once in a while we'll hear about the double bottom line, but can we really develop an economics where people are really a part of it, and when we can talk about the social aspects of our economic development? The Schumacher Society has been involved in housing, land conservation, farm infrastructure, and has been sort of had a rural focus for many years. I've just come on in January, and my role there is going to be to take the lessons learned from the Schumacher Society and now to start to apply them to urban communities. One of the things, and you know what, we've got to think creatively. We've got to think outside the box, and we have to be willing to be bold and even naive enough to say we can redesign some of the basic systems that we operate under. This little graphic down here, this is local currency. The Schumacher Society has created a currency called Berkshires based on the thinking and writing of people like Jane Jacobs, who says we need to understand that currency is really important, but it should be a way of communicating the health of a community. $9 gets you 10 Berkshires, and we've got about 100 businesses, over 100 businesses in the region that will accept these. Now, why do we do this? We do this primarily because if you walk around, you've got a bunch of Berkshires in your pocket, and you decide you're going to go, you need something, goods or services. If you reach in your pocket, the first thing you're going to do is say, can I get it locally? Can I obtain them locally? We now have, again, over 100, not only 120 businesses, but we also have banks involved in this. So it's a concept, it's not a gimmick, it's a real tool to help us generate and promote local economic development. Lessons that we get. You know, we have lessons, we have our friends, again here from other countries that are giving us and telling us about some real important information and examples of what we can do. Spain, with its cooperatives, has Mondragon. You probably know about the Mondragon cooperative in the vast region of Spain. Cleveland has taken a lead. I have to give another plug for my hometown here, and they've created the Evergreen Cooperative. And the idea here is small is beautiful, but every once in a while you also need some big companies. And if those big companies, let's say in this case Cleveland Clinic, is providing really important services to the community, and they employ a lot of people. But they're also buying lots of goods and services. And where are they buying those goods and services? Are they purchasing them locally? Could they be purchased locally? This is another lesson from Jane Jacobs. Import substitution, import replacement. Look at what you need in your community. Look at where it comes from. And is it possible that you could purchase those locally? And if so, could the local community, people, we're talking about people, can local people benefit from that type of activity? And what we found is forming cooperatives is a way for that to begin to happen, where you create this structure that allows you now to work with some of your anchor businesses that support your small businesses as you grow your economy. And that's an important lesson. So we want to do that. Producing energy and goods. I'm not going to get too much into energy because it's already been talked about, but I'm going to get into our urban agriculture, but it's a multi-layered urban agriculture. It starts at the ground, it goes to shrubs, it also includes orchards, permaculture, right? We need to talk about all the things we can do, and also then realize that planting them strategically, integrating them into our planning increases the environment, the microclimate, so there are many benefits to be derived from doing this in the right way. The sky is not the limit. What we've got to do is, again, we've got one energy income source that this planet has depended upon for 4 billion years, and it's the sun. So if we can take advantage of that and realize that we can start to understand how do we meet our basic needs. There are other things we can, job creation can address a number of things, but if we can meet our very basic needs, food, energy, and shelter, and do that locally, it becomes a very empowering process. I learned about this firsthand in my experience at a place called the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative in Boston. Dudley Street is a multicultural neighborhood of African Americans, Latino, Cape Verdeans, and white. One thing we had in common, poor. Located right in the heart, right in the center of Boston, and in the mid-'70s, early '80s, devastated. Began with white flight, but then disinvestment, redlining, even racism, slumlording came to really unravel and destroy this neighborhood, to the point where, in order to minimize losses, slumlords torched their buildings to collect their insurance, and to a point where this neighborhood was reduced to ashes. 1,400 abandoned, vacant lots in the very heart of the city of Boston. But they rebuilt. And it's really amazing. They rebuilt because the community came up with a plan, the community got together to do it, and this is the people power. This is, the collective wisdom and knowledge of the community. They put together a structure. 30-member board of directors, every ethnic group represented, the churches represented, the community development corporations involved, and the city. The city gave us their support to the point where this organization became the first nonprofit, community-based organization to be given the power of eminent domain over all abandoned vacant land in its area. And there was a thought, what are they going to do with this? Can they possibly use this? They took that power and they redeveloped their homes and created a vibrant urban village that had as its heart, you thought, when is he going to get to food? Food at its heart, food production. So we dared to be naive. One of the first things that the community did and said, we're going to build houses, we want to build jobs, but we're also going to take care of some of our negatives. The Brook Avenue garage was an eyesore. It was a brownfield right in the heart of the community. You can see there, it was oil. We got money from the Mass Highway Department. The Mass Highway Department with money to clean up polluted areas. We took that garage and tore it down. And in its place, we created this greenhouse right in the center, 10,000 square foot greenhouse that became the anchor for our urban agriculture program, built, by the way, on a community land trust. Community land trust, so that the community land trust binds people together. We have something in common. Yes, you can own your own home, and believe me, there were lots of discussions and lots of concerns about, why don't I own the land? I need to own the land. We said, well, the community owns the land, but you own your building or your house, but that becomes sort of a cohesive force in bringing people together. And so people bought into it, and we rebuilt brand new homes. And the urban agriculture, as I said, becomes sort of a mainstay and an anchor in this process. Now, we also learned some things from other countries. I mentioned Spain. We've got, again, the Netherlands, Denmark. We're learning some very valuable lessons from Cuba. I was in Cuba for 6 days on sustainable food systems tour. And the reason we were interested in Cuba is because they went through a period, obviously, after the collapse of the Soviet bloc in the late 1980s, where they had no access to chemical fertilizers, pesticides, or any resources to purchase them. So they had a choice, either starve or find a way to grow your food without chemical fertilizers or pesticides. And that's important to us because we live in a community that had been polluted, contaminated with brownfields. And the last thing we want to do as we build up our agriculture program is to reintroduce into our community harmful products. And so we looked at this and said, this is a really powerful lesson we can learn. And now we're setting up a network, a Cuban-U.S. agroecology network that's going to link small farmers in Cuba with small farmers in the U.S. and especially urban farmers to talk about how we can work together. We can take some traditional values, traditional farming values, add innovation, and figure out how to do some things and grow food in sustainable ways that haven't been done before. These are again, you can look at the freight containers, right? The ship freight containers. They've now been purchased and they've been fitted with LED lighting and hydroponic systems, and they're producing 6 plantings of greens a year. And by the way, these are freight containers that they get at a bargain because they don't have to have the refrigeration units working. As a matter of fact, you don't need a refrigeration unit. What you want is just the opposite. You want these things to be warm. So, and they could be sited on vacant lots or in places they need a source of electricity, but they can go a great ways to sort of now taking advantage of underutilized or spaces so we can grow food. It don't have to be green. Also, we have the rooftop gardens and rooftop farms that are also part of the scheme. Really quickly, City of Boston took a really bold step, zoned the entire city to allow commercial farming within city limits. If you don't have zoning, it's not allowed. And so you know what? Not only do we want backyard gardens and community gardens, but we would like to have commercial farms where folks can kind of address those issues of the food desert. So that's been happening. Public market that will only source locally grown food. This is going to be, again, a new building with your public markets, and we have one in Pittsburgh and there are others, but this one will focus on locally sourced foods. And let me just say finally, can we talk about a cluster, economic development that has food as its focal point, but then gets into value added, gets into processing, gets into some other things that celebrate the traditions and the culture of the neighborhood, but come up with jams, jellies, sofrito, any type of value added products that can lead to some really interesting economic development opportunities based, once again, on food. And then finally, we're going to take it to the streets. And someone mentioned food trucks, but food trucks can do a number of different things. We've got some food trucks that actually are mobile markets that go to low-income communities and deliver where they don't have access to it. We've got some that are, again, set up in the city, some that deliver to elite restaurants, and some that are actually walk-in diners. So I'm going to end by saying what we need is a revolution, a design science revolution that says, let's take what we know about the world, how it works, how nature works, the principles that we've gained from there, and apply them to human life support. And I thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll take that. You got that? Riveting. Greg, we know we have a lot of need for urban agriculture, and we know of the socio and ecological benefit of it. How do we create more incentives for the investment of time, energy, and resources into, really this urban agricultural and green space?
Well, it's interesting. I think one of the things and one of the biggest obstacles to getting one of these programs started is access to land. And so one of the things that we've been, at least when I was Commissioner of Agriculture, we tried to work with local communities, tried to work with the city. We tried to say, can we do an inventory and find ways that we can make certain lands available to urban farmers, well, obviously with some stipulations in terms of what we get in return. And we've also, I should also mention, maybe a pilot programs. We created a couple of grants programs that allowed folks to try it out and to try to figure out some of the lessons that they could, learn by doing some of these pilot projects and then transfer them to other farmers as well.
Very good. Pittsburgh, compared to other similar-sized cities, have a large concentration of food deserts. And so why do you think that is? Is it a lack of transportation, walkability? What do you think?
Or just investment. I mean, again, when supermarkets have to make a decision, and again, this gets back to there's a single bottom line. And again, this is not a criticism, but when you decide you're going to site a supermarket, it's got to meet certain criteria in terms of volume, in terms of whatever. And so sometimes those siting issues don't coincide with what the needs of what the individual or communities or the residents need. So there are economic decisions based on the old model of economics. That's why I'm saying I think we need to rethink what we mean by economics and what can we do to, again, you use the term incentivize even some of those, in the case could be supermarkets, could be small markets to move into those communities. But if we can't do it there, then we got to look at and see what some of the gaps can be plugged by urban agriculture.
Very good. Thank you so much, Greg. Thank you. I want to remind everyone that we are trending on Twitter, so we would encourage you to continue to tweet and so forth. The next presenter is from Siemens Corporation, and we know that we have to, in order to create these ladders of opportunity, we have to build the skills. Angela touched on, we need to prepare our citizens, our residents, for the new jobs, from occupational skills to vocational education to community colleges. The next presenter is going to talk about what they're doing at Siemens in their human resources to do just that and create apprenticeship models and things that can, opportunities to lift people up and prepare our residents for the future. So with that, I'm going to bring about Jürgen Seibel, Vice President of HR for Siemens Corporation.
Okay. Yes, hello everyone. Thank you for inviting me here to lovely Pittsburgh, although it started raining. I think, hopefully it's not me that caused this. I'm based in another city, in Munich, in Germany, which considers itself not to be as Nordic as most of the other European cities that are represented here today. It is the headquarters of Siemens, but our single biggest market in the world is actually in the US. We employ 50,000 employees in the States, 6,000 of which in the state of Pennsylvania, and roughly 3,800 in and around Pittsburgh. Also, our company provides solutions that could help cities to increase or improve their infrastructure, from smart buildings to smart transportation systems and smart grids. But I don't want to talk about that. Of course, we would like to be in these kinds of conversations with the city of Pittsburgh, clearly, but I'm going to talk about something else. Another strength of Siemens, and this is our experience and expertise in work-based education. In fact, I'm going to talk about employability, as you may have gathered from this title slide, because that's the key thing that we're looking for. Let me start with two interesting facts. One is from a McKinsey report that came out last year in March 2014 on education and employment in Europe. And they asked the same question to 3 different groups. And the question was, to what extent do the education programs that we have prepare the learners for the workplace and for the labor market? And the answer amongst students and graduates was to 38%. 38%. If you ask the same question to employers, the answer is to the degree of 35%. And if you ask the education providers, the answer is to 74%. So I think we have a perception issue there. And the second fact I want to share with you is from just 3 weeks ago in The Economist, interesting article. If you can still find it, please read it, on is it worth going to university? And a whole lot of aspects in this whole story, but one that was really striking is clearly the US has the best research universities on the planet, even better than Stockholm, I'm sure. Yeah? But when it comes to graduate output quality, there's no significant difference. So is it really worth going to these prestigious institutions? And so they asked a number of recruiters from professional service firms, why do you still keep recruiting from these prestigious universities in the US? And the answer was, well, not so much for the content they may have learned, but for those very selective selection processes and procedures that the people have gone through before. So this seems to me as if Harvard was nothing but a very, very expensive screening mechanism. Yeah? And I think there must be something wrong in our education system if this is the perception. Let me try to explain why I'm so much pushing for vocational education. It's a matter of fact that you cannot learn everything you need to know, for example, about project management from a textbook. You can also not learn it in class, not even from the most prestigious university professor in this field, because they will tell you everything about their requirements, engineering, milestone planning, etc., but they will not tell you that in every single project team there's at least one sociopath. Yeah? And that's true. I mean, everyone who's worked in projects will know this fact. So you cannot learn this. There are certain things that you have to experience. And our education models, as we have them, they do not cater for this need sufficiently. Yeah? There's not too much experience element in there. Is there an exception in the world in terms of education systems? Was all of France really occupied by the Romans? No, there's one exception, and this exception is the German-style, so-called dual vocational education system, dual VET, with the apprenticeship model. And I don't want to bore you. Why does this not move on? Good now. I could talk on dual vocational education, German style, for hours, but I won't. I try with one simple explanation that you find on this screen here. It's fairly easy. It is dual in a dual sense, because you could apply the dual to public and private partnership. This is the two P's, so it's the public and private sector have to collaborate for this. And the second is the combination of theory and application. That is the two very simple dualities in this model, and if you do your math correctly, you will end up with the right solution with employability to the degree of 3. Yeah? Why? To the power of 3, sorry. Why? Because first of all, the learner will acquire marketable skills. And by the way, will earn money while they do it instead of piling up debt. Secondly, employers like us, we will obtain access to an employable talent pool. Yeah? And thirdly, society will, because of the employability of the population, attract investments. Yeah? So it's really 3 beneficiaries of this type of model, and that's why Siemens and I personally believe so strongly in it. You have to have one caveat, however. Such an education model does not produce employment. Yeah? It really only produces employability. And in Europe, in the European Union, we currently have a fierce debate about what can we do to reduce these shocking levels of youth unemployment. You may be familiar, Spain and Greece, 50% youth unemployment. But even Sweden, sorry to say, 18, I think, roughly 18% youth unemployment. And this is a social time bomb. If we then come in these discussions and say, well, do more VET education, then we often hear, why invest in these costly vocational training programs if the jobs are simply not there? Well, my answer to this is, while we are waiting, we should use the time to create the employability that we will eventually need when the labor market kicks in, because we see a very slight recovery in Europe, and labor markets usually follow with a time lag. But by the time the labor market will express its needs, we have to create that employability. Otherwise, investments will go elsewhere, to Asia or other places. So employability is what we have to look for, not so much employment. I know, even though employment is always a top item on any politician's agenda. What we really preach in these models is a new way of providing both a theoretical learning and a practical applied experience, as in the example of the project team. It is very crucial to provide the young learner with the application early on, because that's what keeps them interested. It's what motivates them to understand Ohm's law. You can do the math later. Let's see it in application first. And that's very important. And the most important factor, however, is not so much those hard skills that we teach. It's while you're doing these kinds of programs, because they are work-based, you acquire all of those soft skills at the same time, even without noticing, because the learners are constantly involved in teamwork. They are with customers, suppliers, co-workers, so they have to understand how a business is run, and they really know what a company looks from the inside when they graduate. And this means that they will be productive as of day 1 upon graduation. Day 1, or even earlier, if we are honest. And if I ask my talent acquisition managers around the globe in Siemens, how long does it take you to take a fresh out from university and get them productive? The average answer is between 6 and 12 months. 6 and 12 months in which we pay a full entry-level salary. And if we could take that money and front-load it into the education phase of life, that would be a huge step forward for everyone. So it is important to embed learning in the context of the learner rather than the other way around. That is the key behind this kind of model. One thing that comes up in this discussion very often is, well, if we are trying to prepare people for the digital transformation that's happening at the moment, will we need to also transform all those teaching methodologies to be more agile, virtual, viral, you name it, all those buzzwords? Yes, we do. We have to do that, but I think we also should take a step back. Actually, we're in a fantastic building for this, because what I learned is that this building used to be, way back, more than 20 years ago, also occupied, at least partly, by a vocational school. There is things that we can learn from the future and that we have to address, because also the young people will want us to address these in our curricula, but there's also things that can come from the past. And the apprenticeship model is 500 years old, and it's still around, and so not all of it can be wrong. And it is, don't forget that it is still in the end an Internet of Things. Yeah? So the Internet is nothing but a veil in front of the real economy that's behind it, and where things need to be built, maintained, serviced. And if you want this in the digital economy, where manufacturing is completely transformed, you will need other kinds of skill sets that are more horizontal. Forget all the Taylorism of the past. People who have to understand larger parts of the value chain. Even machinists at the shop floor will have to. And if you want to build their skills accordingly, and if you're serious about your reindustrialization agenda in the US, you will have to provide for those kinds of skill sets, because you can't only have engineers doing this. At this point in time, because I only have about 3 minutes left, let me allow me to have a little pulse check here. How many of you think that some of the things I said so far make sense? You make my day. Great. Now, how many of you would send your own daughter or son to our vocational training program for machinists in North Carolina, where we build steam and gas turbines and generators together? This program is run together with the Central Piedmont Community College. 4-year course, and it's modeled along the lines of these learning methodologies. How many of you would send your son or daughter? You see, but that's my problem, yeah? It's not too many. Why? Because I think one of the biggest obstacles to all of this is my son, my daughter should go to university, yeah? And this is okay, we can live with this, because we believe that this work-based type of education is not at all a ceiling. It's really a flaw. It's something from which you can start a very valuable career. First of all, you start without debts. Yeah, that's the first plus. In Charlotte, North Carolina, if these apprentices we hire later on want to go on to university, we have a tuition reimbursement program for them, because we want to keep them and we want to involve them. We evolve them. And we also want to hire from the shop floor for our supervisory and managerial ranks in the factory, because that's what builds the bond with the employees. That's what creates a loyalty in our workforce that is beyond compare. And that's why it is really not a ceiling, it is a flaw. And first and foremost, I think even universities will, at one point in time, start to think about integrating more work-based elements, because universities' business models are eroding. With all the MOOCs, all the download your user-generated content, that's like the music industry 20 years ago. Yeah? And yes, still, of course, some prestigious institutions will survive. However, if you want something that cannot be virtualized, it must be practical experience. because you can't virtualize that. It's not downloadable. You have to go to the lab. You have to go into the company to experience this. So universities, and in Germany we're already doing this, 30% of our apprentices already pursue what we call a dual degree program, which gives you a bachelor degree in mechanical engineering plus, let's say, a mechatronics Chamber of Commerce and Industry certified apprenticeship certificate instead of 7 years for the total in 4 years, and these people even have a foreign stint, so they go to another country while they're with us, and they are, if you ask HR managers, they are the best material we can possibly get. So coming to my last slide, I already said this, so I don't have to repeat it. My request is only, if you consider an education reform agenda, and if there's still some space in your cookbook, maybe half a page, include some of those ideas, and I think you would make your community very happy, because again, it attracts investment, and why shouldn't that community not be Pittsburgh that has a first mover advantage here? So with all of that, thank you very much. 9 seconds to go.
Well done. Well done. I'll take that. Well done, Jürgen. Particularly in a city like Pittsburgh, we've got tremendous world-class, state-of-the-art, world-class universities and four-year colleges. And often there's a bit of a stigma attached to vocational training. I think you alluded to that. How do we incentivize folks to, hire more through the vocational training programs, and also how do we begin to sort of reduce that stigma associated with, more vocational training?
I think, Angela made this very clear in her opening remark, or in her opening speech here for this session. It's a lifelong learning path. It starts at grammar school and ends somewhere at a doctorate or elsewhere. And we believe in continuous learning, and it can be an ideal starting point. And our CFO of Siemens, global CFO, Ralph P. Thomas, he started as a banking clerk apprentice. He later earned a PhD and is now the CFO of a 75 billion euro company. So it's possible, maybe not for everyone, but you can go through this, and you have to make back to the reform agenda, you have to make your system permeable. So people, once they graduate from vocational, they should maybe even earn credit points for the first year of an academic course. Why not? There's a multitude of solutions, and be rest assured it works.
Well, very good. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Our next presenter probably needs no introduction. We know that the tech space and the maker space is a really exciting and growing movement here in Pittsburgh, and we're going to hear more about that from the founder, the co-founder and CEO of Tech Shop. I'll bring out Mr. Mark Hatch. Mark Hatch.
Here we go. So we're going to talk, kind of cover three things. First, do a brief overview of the maker movement itself. We'll talk some about what Tech Shop is, what a maker space is, and then go through a series of slides that demonstrate the impact that the maker movement is having. So as a former Green Beret, I like to use the terms of revolution, and I believe we are in the middle of a revolution, and it's completely appropriate, so that is why the book is called a manifesto. It is a manifesto, it is a revolution. We're trying to get people to join it and to help remake society around kind of the maker gestalt. As a Green Beret, I also like to blow things up, and so we're blowing up some old things and bringing in some new. And there are going to be some moments throughout this deck that you're going to want to participate in some way. So I'm going to allow you to do that. I want you to yell boom every once in a while. We'll do it collectively, and so just real quick, on 3, 1, 2, 3, boom. Oh, that was beautiful. We're not even going to do a practice session. So we've had a great couple of years in the maker movement. It's about 10 years old. And we've started to see some really interesting results. So the first one is like MakerBot. What I love about MakerBot is the founder of MakerBot was Bree Pettis. 6 years ago, Bree was a junior high art teacher. He just had a $600 million exit. Not bad for a junior high art teacher. He did it over about 5 years. 1, 2, 3. Boom. You can do better than that. 1, 2, 3. Boom. All right, so Autodesk has joined the movement. They've actually traded an entire division. They've probably spent something on the order of $600 to $700 million. They've got an entirely new division. They've launched all kinds of things on the web. They've bought Instructables. They've bought GrabCAD. They've got a whole bunch of different things they're doing. Etsy is now worth more than $1 billion. Kickstarter has done more than $1 billion worth of transactions. Shapeways was released from Philips to do their own thing. GE is now involved. Intel finally launched Galileo and the other Arduino type of boards. The White House came and visited Tech Shop Pittsburgh. Yay. 1, 2, 3. Boom. We've had books. Did I mention my book? Yeah, there's a couple of books have come out, and we've got multiple accelerators, including Alpha Lab Gear here in Pittsburgh that launched immediately after we opened the Tech Shop space up in East Liberty. So for those of you who may not know what a tech shop or a makerspace is, it's membership-based, open access, do-it-yourself fabrication shop. Open access means anybody 16 years old or older can come in and use the tools. It's not an accelerator. You don't have to present a business plan. The only transaction that's required is you got to pay your monthly fee and you get access to the entire facility. DIY means you do it. We don't do it for you. It's not a prototyping shop. You learn how to use the tools, and then you make the stuff that you want to make. And we call these maker spaces. Tech Shop has 8. We have 8 of them in the US so far. We're opening Munich next month. We've got 22 more in the pipeline. We envision it eventually becoming the Kinkos of the 21st century. There will be 1,000 of them around the globe where you can get things made locally by local artisans, and you can actually participate. Ours are 20,000 square feet. It's every tool you need, and I'm going to show you the tools. $125 a month, hundreds of classes. We do teach about 200 classes a month in each location. And we do all kinds of corporate events. So if you're doing any kind of team building, you got to come out to East Liberty or come to one of our other locations. Lasers and beer, welding and wine, water jet and whiskey. 1, 2, 3. Boom! It is a lot of fun. These events are fabulous. We're sitting at kind of in the intersection of the maker movement. You've got the collaborative economy, which is the Uber and those folks. You've got the maker movement, which is the MakerBot and Make Magazine. We are an educational institution. 35% of our revenue is teaching people how to use the tools so that they can produce things. And we're something of a retailer, and there's a real estate play. Let's get to the tools. So these are your traditional industrial grade tools, mills and lathes with digital readouts, computer numerically controlled mills. This is important. What's happened in the last decade is that by adding computers to these various different tools, we can now teach you how to become a master woodworking craftsman, or the equivalent, a master CNC operator in 2 or 3 days. You learn how to use the software, you manipulate it, and then the machine does the execution. You don't need to understand geometry, you don't need to understand calculus, the machine and the computer takes it for you. Now, you're not going to be world class at it, but you're going to be good enough to get your project to the next phase. I used to run innovation at Avery Dennison, and I would have stage-gated new product development cycles. We are having companies launch their entire company from the ground and not even knowing how to use the tools to $1 million in sales inside of what used to be one of my stages. Used to have a 9-month to a 18-month development cycle. Entire companies are launching inside, and the reason is because of the combination of the software and the hardware. So we have all the other traditionals. Of course, we got 3D printers, as I mentioned already. We've got laser cutters. We call this our gateway drug. I'm from San Francisco, I can say that. If you want to be a pusher, there's certain things that you need, like the first hit's free, as they say, and then the key is powerful, easy to use, and extremely addictive. That is the laser cutter. We have had people accidentally launch businesses after taking one class. They take a $60 class, they show up the next week with some tchotchkes that they're showing their friends want them, the friends of friends wants them, they launch an Etsy store. One young lady has now become the Martha Stewart of the Silicon Valley. It's called Britton Company. She came in and started that way. We had a homeless man, we didn't know he was homeless, living in a shelter, spent his last $50, learned how to use the laser cutter, and completely rebooted his life 1, 2, 3, boom. He's now created a thing called a learning shelter, and he's helping other homeless people come through our space to reboot their lives. The laser cutter is a phenomenal gateway tool. Sheet metal. Of course, welding, we love welding. Date night is fabulous. You come in and you learn how to weld in the evening, you're dealing with fire and sparks, it's phenomenal. The water jet, we call this our sexy beast. It'll cut through 5 inches thick of anything on the planet. We teach you how to use it in 2 hours. It cuts through concrete, granite, titanium, pigs, cows. It'll cut through everything. Woodworking, again, computer numerically controlled, so you can take 2 classes and produce incredibly elegant woodworking pieces. Plastic lab, I gotta pick the pace up, come on here. Injection molding machines. Software, as I mentioned already, is very important. Autodesk has been a leader in that space and is one of our partners. Textiles, we have multiple people who have created projects that have been on the New York Fashion Week, as well as actually launch businesses. Some immigrants can't even afford the $1,500 sewing machine when they first come, so they come in, they join, they take a $125 class, they now have access to a complete textiles lab, they produce 3 or 4 nice suits, and they go out and buy the machine and they're on their own. That's happened at least 4 or 5 times that I'm aware of. Large project bay for doing big projects. I've mentioned team building and events already, lasers and beer, it's a lot of fun. The most important thing, though, that we're doing, people get distracted by all the sexy tools, and that's understandable because they're a lot of fun and you don't usually get access. You don't usually get to walk up and touch these things in a normal environment. You do in ours. But what we're actually doing is we're aggregating the most creative people in the community to hang out and work together on the projects they care about on a daily basis. And our objective is to get over 500 members, because once you have 500 members in one of these spaces, you are now 2 degrees of freedom from success. If you don't have the answer, you don't understand what it is you need to do next, you can go to one of our dream consultants. The odds are they know exactly what you need to do. And if they don't, because we've aggregated this community of the most creative people in the city, the answer is on site. And the dream consultant knows who's there and will introduce you to them right now. That is how you keep a project moving, is you create an environment where you've got the learning, you've got the tools, and you've got the community to be able to keep the project moving forward. It's phenomenal. So I'm going to talk some about the projects. We're part of the Maker Movement, which is fun. You should come to a Maker Fair, a New York Maker Fair or the San Mateo Fair. But we get kind of thrown into this milieu where people think, well, you know, the Maker Faire, that's just for kids and they're little crafty projects and they're blinky lights and it's kind of an introduction to STEM. It's like, yes, we do that. But in a full-blown maker space like Tech Shop, we have all of the tools of the Industrial Revolution. We have the same tools that the researcher at Ford Motor Company is using, that General Electric is using, that others are using. These are not toys. These are real tools that you can do some amazing things with, like build the world's fastest electric motorcycle. It did 218 miles an hour on the Bonneville Salt Flats. It was completely constructed at Tech Shop because you can't get an electric motorcycle electric harness. You have to build it yourself. You can't get an electric motorcycle motor. You've got to design and build it yourself. You can't get an electric motorcycle transmission. You're going to have to build it yourself. You don't have the fairing. You don't have the frame. They built all of that in our location in Menlo Park. They won Pikes Peak this year. Not only did they beat all the electric motorcycles, they destroyed the entire field. When was the last time you saw a professional race where the second place finisher came in 20 seconds later? This boy had a shower and a beer by the time the Ducati Superbike came across the finish line. 1, 2, 3, boom. They're going into production this spring and it will do 218 miles an hour. It is the fastest production motorcycle the world has ever seen. You'll be able to buy it out of their Menlo Park location. Andy's working on a jetpack, so if you really need to get there fast, I would recommend one of these. We've had satellites, a bunch of nanosat or CubeSat satellites that have come out of our Menlo facility. This is one of the many success stories. So Max was a designer at a store close by, and he wanted to own his own company, and he needed $60,000 to get it started. Historically, where are you going to go to get 60 grand if you're a 24-year-old kid with no collateral? Nowhere. Now, because of Kickstarter, you can raise the money. I was concerned for him because he was trying to raise 60 grand. It would have put it in the top 10% of the most successful projects that year. I should not have been concerned. It's absolutely gorgeous. He raised $480,000 and launched his company. Had never used a laser cutter before, had never done Arduino before, had built the prototype, raised the money, and launched his company. He was on Shark Tank this last season, and they had a feeding frenzy. All 5 of the sharks wanted to be in that business. So Max is up and running. Anton, same story. Basically, this is a folding kayak. He was looking for like $70,000 and raised about $500,000. He was also on Shark Tank and raised money that way. Did all the development on. Patrick came in and said, "What classes do I need to take to learn how to build an iPad case out of bamboo and bookbinding?" He took 3 classes. Within 90 days of walking through our door, he had sold $1 million in product. He did $3 million in the first year, $10 million in the second, $35 million in the third. He's got a manufacturing facility in downtown San Francisco, saved a bookbinding company, and employs 25 employees. None of those have changed the world. Oh, and by the way, the President of the United States carries one. None of those changed the world, though. These next 6 have. So you may have heard of Square, the merchant banking system. James McKelvey was the brains behind that. Jack is the one that gets a lot of the press. Those are the original 3 prototypes. It's a $6 billion company now. Does about $60 billion in transactions. The world's most efficient data cooling center, licensed to Emerson Electronics. The world's first nitrogen detection device to help farmers figure out whether or not they've got enough fertilizer or not. The world's only stove that will power your electronics, which is pretty important in some parts of the world where you have rolling brownouts. This is the world's cheapest drip irrigation system, and then my favorite is this one here. This is an incubation blanket, came out of the design school at Stanford. They then landed at Tech Shop and upgraded, actually had like a 4-fold improvement in the core technology. This has saved 87,000 babies so far. 1, 2, 3, boom. So what happens when you give the creative class access to the tools of the Industrial Revolution? They change the world, and it only costs $125 a month. So here's the impact that Tech Shop has had in the Bay Area alone. $12 billion in shareholder value has been created, $2 billion in annual sales, $200 million in annual salaries, 2,000 jobs. The state of California at the 10% bracket is pulling $20 million a year out of the innovation that has come out of the Tech Shop network in California. 1, 2, 3.
All right. Nice job. Grab that up.
Yeah, I'll give you that.
Clearly, the makerspace is changing the world. My question is, what are some of the ways that we can connect not only the makerspace, Tech Shop, and this creative movement to underserved communities and underserved neighborhoods? We talk about inclusion.
Absolutely.
My challenge is that we get more, African Americans and Hispanics up on that screen with new businesses.
Absolutely.
So how do we do that? How do we connect to the underserved
Well,
population?
I'll be straight. We need to get every kid at Garwood, that area just outside of East Liberty, every one of them should have a summer pass to Tech Shop and a few $100s to take classes. There's just no excuse for not letting that happen. General Electric and the Veterans Administration helped to fund this. They did it through a services contract with us where we provided access and training to 2,000 veterans across the U.S. We can do the same thing right here in Pittsburgh.
Amen.
All right.
All right, thank you. Thank you. All right, last but not least, we're going to bring up someone who is a transportation guru. We know connectivity, transportation, very, very critical to our future development in Pittsburgh. This gentleman's name is Gabe Klein. He's the senior venture partner with Fontanalis Partners, also the former chief transportation officer in Chicago and Washington, D.C. Gabe Klein.
Hey. Thank you. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. How are you? So all I could hear backstage was boom. I didn't know what was going on. So we're going to talk a little bit about new mobility. It's supposed to say new mobility big, but I did this on an Apple and it's on a PC, so you can't see it. But we're going to talk about history, where we've been. We're going to talk about where we are and where we're going, all in 14 minutes and 30 seconds. And I got told that if I come in, for every minute I come in under, I get a martini and $50 because we're behind by Karen. So we'll see, although I have a lot of slides. So get ready for a PowerPoint slide roller coaster ride. All right. So before we talk about history, which is very important, we're going to talk about big history. And the fact is that we're here by accident. So what do I mean by that? So the dinosaurs were made extinct by an asteroid 65 million years ago. We've been on the planet for a couple 100,000 years by accident. Basically, if that hadn't happened, we wouldn't be here. And so it's a very fragile ecosystem that we live in. And we're just starting, I think, as Angela was saying earlier, to realize that. Now, not everybody agrees, and this is not meant to be partisan, by the way. This is meant to let people know that we have a battle on our hands for our future. And there's a lot of money behind maybe not doing anything. But here's the good news. Here's the good news for everybody. We've done studies, and people can't quite comprehend something this big bearing down on us, right? Even Hurricane Sandy, that happened. It's almost like we've forgotten. But we do understand the economic effects, and we do understand the economic opportunities of making change. And when you look at a place like Pittsburgh, if Pittsburgh can go through this transformation and make this change, anybody can. It can be done. Now we have other problems. Who knows what this number means? Anybody? You only have 3 seconds. This is the number of people that die worldwide on our roads due to vehicular accidents. And we lose about 32,000 in the US. So, we tend to think, hey, this is the cost of doing business. This is the cost of having this freedom as automobilists, as we used to call ourselves back in the day. The thing is, half of that 1.24 million, those are our most vulnerable citizens. Those are our old people, our young people, our disabled people. And we've got to stop thinking culturally that this is acceptable and it's okay. We've also got health issues. I was recently reading that chronic diabetes has been linked to the air quality. And as we re-urbanize, we've got to think about our air quality to save our kids. Now, we know that cities are complex ecosystems, and we're going to talk more about that in just a minute. And not everything was great back in the day. This is a shanty town in Seattle, and you can see the pollution. And what's interesting is, this is Pike Market, actually, in Seattle. I was just out there a couple weeks ago. A lot of times, these cities that are the old cities that actually keep that old aspect of themselves alive are very valuable cities. So Pittsburgh has an incredibly rich history. Pittsburgh made things. Pittsburgh had an energy industry. Pittsburgh also was on the front of cycling. This is actually 1898, North Pittsburgh. Who says women can't wear dresses and ride a bike? In 2015. They did it before. Luna Park. If you look closely, there's a steam engine vehicle to the right. On the left, there's a horse and buggy, and there's a bicycle right in the middle with one of those things that came back in the 90s. So those little padded things, so you could bring the bike up the stairs in your tenement. This is 6th Avenue, and if you look very closely, you probably can't see it from here, but there's a sign that says digital carriage dispatch. I don't know what their definition of digital was in 1900, but they would call a carriage for you. So they had technology here in Pittsburgh. Also, some of the first double-decker trolleys. Trolleys go back to 1850 when they passed legislation at the state level to allow streetcars. And actually, the streetcars, this is a picture from 1984, but they ran until 1999. And these last few PCC cars had over 2 million miles on them per vehicle. You won't find that on a bus or a car or anything else. And the Sky Bus, I was reading about this, pretty amazing. So the other great thing about Pittsburgh, not afraid to try and fail. And that's okay. That's what we want. We need more of that. So what's happening now? And I'm gonna have to go a little faster, I'm sorry. We went from hyper-consumption post-war. Everybody wanted their own white picket fence, their own 750 square foot house, their own 2 cars, to collaborative consumption. People want experience, they want to live in a city, particularly younger people. And so we went from a me economy to a we economy. Services like Lyft, services like Uber, services like Airbnb, which you saw earlier. People call these peer-to-peer networks. So we're going from having a set supplier and a customer to everybody being a seller and everybody being a buyer. And I'm here to tell you that if you think, Uber at $45 billion is sort of the new thing, in a few years it could be that, Uber's taking 35% of every ride. Could be that somebody comes along and figures out how to take a quarter and make it a real peer-to-peer network. So the disruptors of today can be the disrupted of tomorrow. And it's not just the private sector that can disrupt. The government is doing amazing things. This is our Divvy bike share system in Chicago, which is now going to, I think, 550 stations and almost 6,000 bikes. Again, people told me, in DC, they'll never wear suits or skirts or heels on a bike. I'm here to tell you that's false. And if you're anything like me, when somebody tells me I can't do something, that's when I absolutely have to prove them wrong. Now, when talking about technology, it's not just the cloud that's changing everything. It's also solar technology is getting better and better and cheaper. Modular design. That allowed us to put these bike sharing systems in at very low cost and very high return. The other thing you're starting to see out there is the repurposing of space. Where'd all the streetcars go? Well, they're gone, but where'd all the space go? Well, we gave it over to cars. So in DC, we took back Pennsylvania Avenue and we made it a cycling street, a complete street for everybody. In Chicago, we knew that if people didn't have a safe way to bike downtown, they weren't going to bike to work. And so we took roads with excess capacity, we repurposed those streets, and we made them into complete streets with 2-way cycling infrastructure. We had sensors to sense the cars and the bikes and trigger signals, and we had better throughput, and people actually started to bike. Now, the Make Way for People program shows in Chicago that you don't have to spend a lot of money to make change. We use about 1/3 of our city public space for storing cars. It's ridiculous. That's inefficient. So how about taking some of this space as we re-urbanize and giving it to people? That's my wife, by the way. This is not my wife, this is somebody else's wife. People want green space. It's about creating place. And I think Jeff Speck is here this afternoon and others that'll talk about that. The funny thing is we're not making investments in the things that matter. We're building more parking garages. We're building more healthcare facilities. We don't necessarily need that with all the technology that's coming. What we need is better public transit, better ped and bike infrastructure, better places. And the return is higher. We know the return is higher. We've done the studies, and we know that this is where people want to live. And we know that businesses do better when there's a bike lane in front of it, or a wider sidewalk, or a parklet. Huge increases in retail. So why now? Because this is the most amazing time in transportation history, at least since those pictures I showed you earlier. Now, when I left government a little over a year ago and started giving this presentation, Elon was saying, hey, we're going to have self-driving cars in 3 years. Then he came out last summer and said, well, it's more like 2 years. Then he came out within a year of his original statement and said, actually, we're just going to download it to the cars this June, and you'll be able to drive from Seattle to San Francisco or from Pittsburgh to DC without touching the steering wheel. That's the rate of change. But the thing is, people aren't prepared for it. They think we're going like this, and that's not at all what's happening. And many of you have heard of Moore's Law. It's probably been brought up on the stage today. This slide is from 1982, but it shows you that things are changing fast, and we can either help shape that change, make that change, or we can become victims of that change, particularly in government, by the way. And the change is going to happen so fast that the cities that do have all the re-engineering that we desire and the technology that we desire will be the safe cities, and those are the cities that people will want to live in. And it doesn't have to be 4,800-pound Teslas, by the way. There are really simple solutions, like the Make Way for People program was simple. very simple pedal electric trikes that are 160 pounds. Jitney buses, that's not new. This is a company that I work with, Bridge. But jitney buses with technology that allows them to be demand aggregated and come to you when you need it, just like the bike share is really nothing new, but it is with all the technology. And it makes it something that everybody can use and share. Or Lyft and Uber now incorporating carpooling, which is nothing new, or hitchhiking is nothing new, but the technology is making it new. So you see a common theme here. There's old meets new, meets a new business model and a new service for people. So how do we get there? We've made horrible planning mistakes. Our DOTs, often embedded in public works departments, have been focused on moving people, throughput, and safety. Not that those aren't important, but I can tell you in Chicago with Rahm Emanuel, we never talked about moving people. We talked about the advantages and benefits of all the features we were bringing to people in terms of their health, in terms of jobs. Whenever Rahm talked about bike lanes, he talked about jobs, and that's what it meant to him. So you also have to break things down to implementable chunks. We have all these great long-range plans, but we put together 24-month plans based on political realities in DC and Chicago, knowing that Adrian Fenty might not win. Now, he was a shoo-in when I started working with him, and then he lost. So you got to get things done in the time frame that you have in business or in government. Fundamentally, we need to redesign around people and stop focusing so much on individual modes. And one of the other things we did in Chicago was actually call out the pedestrian as the indicator species of a healthy city. Because the pedestrian is a transit user, is a cyclist, and is an auto user. But if you don't call them out, the car becomes the de facto mode that everybody plans for. Because we're lazy, and we see so many cars out there, and that's what we do. Now, there are big projects, and some people say, well, you can do that small stuff fast, but the big stuff, like the $100 million reinvention of the Riverwalk, how do you do that fast? Well, I don't have time to tell you, but I am writing a book that will have a chapter on this. But this was a $100 million project that we conceived in May of 2011. I mean, people had thought about it. We actually put together a conceptual design, lined up the funding, did the engineering, and did the public outreach, and went to construction all in about 24 months. And the first 4 blocks are opening this spring. So big projects don't have to take the average 13 to 14 years that they take. You can do them fast, and you can get to construction fast and realize the economic benefits. Also, who remembers when Rick Scott turned back the high-speed rail money? All right. So the Flagler family, who built the original railroad in 1883, and now are mega land barons in Florida, said, wait a second, we're going to do this again. And they sold all their land, and they're rebuilding that East Coast rail line as high-speed rail, and then they're building big TOD around the nodes in Jacksonville and Miami, and they will make more money, I predict, than they had before. Autonomous and vehicle-to-vehicle technology are going to dramatically change the way our cities run, our highways run. Pods, vehicles that just pick you up and take you where you want to go, it's coming. I've been in these cars. They're amazing. They're low-speed vehicles. And some of the technologies are available in the cars that you have today. It just hasn't been knitted together yet, but it will be before the end of this decade. And we'll have safer cities because of it. And the big thing for those of you that are planners is if we have parking minimums, not only do you need to get rid of those and go to parking maximums, but soon we aren't going to be building any more parking. And we'll be trying to figure out very quickly how to get rid of all the parking that we've built because we won't need it. And the public and the private sector are going to have to work together to the point where in some projects they'll be indistinguishable. And a lot of the services that are going to help our cities become the cities of the future are going to be brought to us by the private sector, with the public sector helping to shape them. And the platforms of the future, the platforms of today that we use in our hands right now, our iPhones and our Google phones, those will be the cars of the future. And it's really just a platform. And you just won't be driving it anymore. But all this talk of high tech, it's really all about us. It's all about families. It's about the environment. And so I put this picture in to remind people that the technology is really just a means to an end. It's not about the technology. It's about creating a quality of life. It's about, taking Pennsylvania from middle of the pack to first, up with DC and Massachusetts and New York as safest in the country. and getting to 0 fatalities. And we have a real opportunity here. We could have a future that looks like this, and I certainly hope not, where pedestrians are relegated to the background, or we could have a very inclusive, peaceful, fun city of the future. And this is what I hope that we build. Thank you so much.
Nice job. Nice job.
Here, I'm just going to take a picture of everybody.
Thank you. Nice job, Gabe.
Thank you.
First, I want to give kudos to our innovative mayor, who last week just signed an executive order for I think our first complete streets policy. So kudos to our mayor, Mayor Peduto, for doing that. As we continue to talk about complete streets and transportation, not only downtown, but in the neighborhoods, and as our city grows, there'll be an increased need and demand for transit-oriented development. What have you seen in other cities, particularly in cities that have similar topographical challenges, like the city of Pittsburgh, and how have they overcome those challenges?
Well, for one thing, I mean, there's over 500 communities now that have complete streets sort of legislated, or, you know, it's there in some form. But there are a lot of places that don't actually do it, right? So they say they're going to do it, but it's got to filter down to the engineers in the transportation department, and it's got to filter down into their practices when they go out and talk to the public about what the project's going to look like, that the conceptual design actually reflects that. So, you know, I think we have a gap in between what people talk about and what they're actually doing. But, you know, one of the things that I think has been very successful in DC, for instance, is providing people as many layers of options as possible. You know, so you provide them, you know, different types of bus service, the circulator bus and the regular bus, and you provide them subway service, and you provide them point-to-point car sharing and regular car sharing on the street in public space, and bike sharing, and you let them choose the best mode for them. So I think the private sector can help a lot with making sure that we have as many options as possible, and the public sector needs to make sure that we take that public right-of-way, that street, and don't just devote all the space to cars.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, can you just feel the brain power in this room? We're now about to segue into lunch. I was told to make a couple of announcements. We do need to make up some time, so lunch will be, they would like you back here in 50 minutes from the time where we depart. So that's 50 minutes for lunch. But before we disperse, we'd like to end this session with another video. And this video is a great video. We've talked about people, we've talked about place, you know, we're talking about air quality and our planet. This video is really done exquisitely with youth, parents, teachers, and I think one of the most important things we can do is leave a world behind that our children and others behind us can be proud of. I have 2 kids. I have a freshman in college, an 8th grade son, and the thing that's most important to me is that they know that their dad did something to make the world a better place for them to raise their children and grow up in. And I think it's appropriate that we share this video with you about our environment and our planet and our need to make our kids proud. So we will roll the video.
So when the steel mills closed down, a lot of people didn't have that many jobs. So people just started leaving, and the number of people living in Pittsburgh went down. But I think it's slowly starting to creep back up. And so since that's happening, I think more people are starting to come back. Oh, people are coming back to Pittsburgh, so that means I should come back too. You know, I think that's what other people are saying.
There's a lot of things that we can do in order to improve our air quality. And I think that if we're going to settle for the air quality as it is today, then we need to dream bigger.
Because there's really some good people out here that want to help change the world, change Pittsburgh, change Hollywood, but we're not being noticed.
For the future of our kids, I just want my kids to live in a healthy environment and airspace. I feel like global warming is going to negatively impact that.
Personally, I believe that global warming is almost penance that we're paying for our poor management of the globe and our mistreatment of the planet.
My concept of sustainability is being able to just do more than just being able to sustain your lifestyles and being able to go beyond that.
Well, the first step for dealing with any sort of these problems is to acknowledge that you actually have a problem. So in the past, we've had problems with the ozone layer, for example. We actually dealt with that. We changed legislation and we accomplished something.
I just hope that my kids stay here, and I think we plan on it.
Too often I see around me people that are oblivious or say, you know, it's a scam. I think it's important that we educate the children now and the leaders of the future so that we can make the best decisions moving forward.
We've been talking a lot about renewable energy, so in the future I would like Pittsburgh to run sustainably on mostly renewable energy.
I want to know that when I walk out the door that I'm safe.
I think the air quality in Pittsburgh is a concern. We try to live healthy lives, we try to eat well, we try to exercise, but I recognize that by living here, my kids are at a greater risk for heart disease and cancer simply because of the air that they breathe.
I like living in Pittsburgh because you get to go in all these buildings around the world, and it's actually like really fun. If they were like taller, it would be awesome.
When Pittsburgh gets behind something, it's a beautiful thing to watch.
I guess a priority of mine would be smart planning, looking to the future.
I think that education's really important, so I want to make sure kids have lots of education. I'll be like a grown-up soon, and it's going to be really fun.
I want to be an architect or a hardware engineer. So when you're I think that there's not a lot of hardware engineers, African American hardware engineers in the USA, and I just want to make that little tiny percentage maybe a tiny bit bigger.
I'd like to see us all act with pride. I think if we do that, whether we're leaders, pastors, teachers, students, parents, if we ask ourselves each day, am I acting in a way that can make my children proud, my constituents proud, myself proud, then we will make